Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. Today's session is turning pay philosophy into real world pay decisions. I'm Aaliyah Grady. I'll be your host today, and I'm a product marketing manager here at Salary.com. A few housekeeping items. So today's session will be recorded, and we will be sharing the slides and the recording with you afterward. Please use the Q&A section of your Zoom toolbar for questions. We will be answering questions live at the end. And professional development credits from SHRM, HRCI, and World at Work codes will be shared at the end of today's session. All right. So today, here's what we'll cover. We'll start with what pay philosophy actually is, then talk about why the gap between what you say and what you do erodes trust. From there, we'll walk you through 3 disconnects that we see over and over again with some practical fixes that you can take back to your own organization and a few clear action steps. We'll also share how we can help, and then we'll do the live Q&A at the end. Okay, so I'm excited to introduce our speaker for today, Katie Staczewski. Welcome, Katie.
Thanks, Aaliyah. I'm happy to be here.
So Katie is the Vice President of Solutions Consulting here. She has nearly 2 decades of experience with Salary.com, and we're excited to hear what your thoughts are today, Katie.
Awesome. I'm super excited about the topic and glad to see we have so many people participating.
I will just repeat just for questions as they come up. Throw those in the Q&A section, and then we will definitely get to them at the end.
Absolutely. We'll try to leave a couple minutes at the end for questions. Awesome. So as Aaliyah mentioned, I'm Katie Staczewski. I've been with Salary.com for forever, and I'm here to talk to you all today about turning pay philosophy into actionable insights. And I think to start it off, as I'm sure is not a surprise, we probably want to talk about what is a pay philosophy. So we're going to start off by talking about what a pay philosophy actually is. I'm sure many of you on today's webinar may have gone through a process of developing a pay philosophy, a comp philosophy. And at the end of the day, really what a pay philosophy is the decision of your organization of why you pay what you pay and what the drivers are that you're looking to get out of that philosophy within your organization. So it's really your guiding principles of why you pay the individuals in the jobs in your organization, not just the salary that you pay, but a lot of the other total rewards that go into their packages as well. And having a pay philosophy is really important. And we're going to talk about that quite a bit in the upcoming slides, because the pay philosophy really helps not only you as an organization have the right blueprints to make pay decisions in a very proactive and ongoing manner in your organization, but really helps to bridge transparency in why you pay the way you do and to help answer questions when employees have them, which they do, whether they're asking them or not, in a way that aligns with what they're seeing on a day-to-day basis. And there's a different type or many types of pay philosophies that organizations might align themselves with. We do have a few up here, types of pay philosophies on this slide. Now, certainly this isn't all encompassing, and you may not find yourself falling into exactly a perfect match from what we're displaying, but really when we think about types of pay philosophy, having a sense of what that means for you also helps you determine, again, what type of pay organization are we? How does this tie to the performance that we're looking at within an organization? How are we going to tie this to things like benchmarking jobs, grading jobs, and be able to answer all those questions that employees might have? So some of the most common types of pay philosophies that organizations find themselves aligned with are things like market leader. And that also might mean you're not a market leader for every job in your organization. Depending on your industry, you might be a market leader for certain segments of your company, but not all, because of the way that the market might dictate a competitive stance when it comes to the type of roles you have internally. But at a very high level, market leader means we tend to pay above average because we want to get the best talent and we want to secure them very, very quickly. So we're willing to pay more upfront than many other organizations are, because we want to constantly be ahead of the curve when it comes to acquiring talent. And we want to put out there that we are an organization that leads with pay. Then there's the market match. This is often the most common. We have a pay philosophy that we are going to pay kind of the median of the market. We're not going to lead the market. We're not going to pay over what most organizations are paying. And we're certainly not going to pay under. We sort of want to be consistently in line with what other organizations are doing. And that might also mean that you are including more robust benefits. It might mean your STI programs might look a little bit different. But certainly there's that idea of we want to be sort of right in the middle. And then in certain places, we might offset how we pay in different ways with benefits and perks. Or again, for certain jobs, we might have to make different decisions within our organization. There's the market lag. Basically, that's the opposite of market leader. So we probably aren't going to pay the highest. We may not have the type of budget to be able to even pay the median. We might be at the 30th percentile. We might be at the 40th percentile. We might be lagging a bit behind. But we do that because in some cases, you may have a very heavy population of roles that are on target earnings. The variable packages might make up for the salary that you see lagging a bit behind the market. Or it might be you're a company based in culture. A lot of nonprofits sort of lag the market, but it's the work that they're doing that really attracts people to their organization. It's the mission, it's what they're putting out there, it's the benefits that they can provide as well. So you might firmly fall into that type of philosophy. And then there's the pay for performance, strongly linking how you pay to individual company results or even equity focused. You see these a lot in startups where initially where you're heavily focused is how can we provide equity to get people in the door? We may not have a foundation yet to build a broader pay philosophy, or it might be on the other side where you're really trying to move into a very aligned culture of fairness and transparency, and equity is a way that you can start to smooth out the balance sheet. So these are just some of the most common that we see. Again, one size does not fit all. Also, you might not see the exact match up there for yourself. But the biggest takeaway from this and why we're having this conversation today is pay philosophy, starting with a grounded philosophy and why you pay the way you pay, how you're paying is the starting point of being able to then implement a strong comp practice and help make sure your employees understand how you make pay decisions within your organization and they have trust that which we'll talk about in how they're receiving the pay for the role that they're taking on within your organization as well. So now that I gave you all of that background, we're going to do a quick poll. And based off of what we just saw, we also want to get an idea from you in the audience. How closely, if you have a pay philosophy, do you feel that the pay philosophy matches your employee experience? Because we're going to talk about some gaps coming up on the next slides that even organizations that have a very strong pay philosophy, employees may not really understand that, or they might not feel that that pay philosophy exists. So we wanted to poll the audience and see where you fall within this spectrum as well. So I see some numbers ticking through.
Yeah, and it's okay if you don't have a stated
Absolutely.
yet. So I definitely wanted to double tap that because it's not uncommon, right?
Absolutely.
All right, I'll give it a few more seconds just as we're getting some more answers. And then I will share out some of our results now. So no one's perfect. No one says
No one's
the line.
perfect. Being honest, I was expecting at least one person, and I'm not saying you're dishonest if you did say, yes, we're 100% tightly aligned, but I do think this is a pretty honest representation of where most companies fall. I think becoming highly tightly aligned between pay and employee experience is a difficult road to travel. I think most organizations still honestly have some gaps. And part of that, which we don't have a ton of slides on today, but we do in other webinars, is how do you help train people to communicate pay? There's a big breakdown in how we pay and then communicating that across your organization. And I often state that you could have the best pay philosophy in the entire world. And if you aren't communicating it correctly, your employees aren't going to realize that. They're going to create some narrative of their own. I do love that we see mostly aligned, though, which means that a big majority of you on the call have decided what your pay philosophy is. It sounds like you're making strides to implement that throughout your merit, your conversations around pay, your hiring practices, which is great. And as Aaliyah mentioned, if you don't have a philosophy yet, or if you're seeing big gaps, maybe the philosophy needs to be revisited. And hopefully some of the slides we have coming up can give you some practical tips on how to do that as well. Could they see these results, by the way?
Yeah.
Perfect. Says share results on my side. So Aaliyah usually runs the slides. So you got me today. So going back, as we talked about some of the gaps that we saw in some of the data, you are not alone. So why the say-do gap? So what we say versus what we do exists within an organization. What you can see up here on this slide is organizations that have a pay philosophy, employees don't tend to necessarily recognize or feel that that pay philosophy is part of the experience that they're having within the organization. So basically, they don't really either understand what your pay philosophy is. They may not feel that they're seeing that within their paycheck or the other awards or rewards, I should say, that you're providing them. And as you see the statistics up here on this slide, and these are based off of World at Work analysis and studies that were completed, 62% of organizations that were part of the World at Work study say they have a written comp philosophy, but only 19% of those same participants say that their employees understand it. That's a huge gap. That's a 43% point gap. And again, I think aligns with a lot of what we're seeing, even in the poll. We have something, there's still gaps. We're trying to overcome those gaps as well. And this is actually a really important piece of this because the truth is, employees don't necessarily read a philosophy doc, even if you say we have it out there. Like we wrote down our comp philosophy, or in some cases, we pinned it up on a board. Like it's on the wall, which is great. But if it's on the wall or if it's in writing, that doesn't necessarily mean what's written is something employees really understand and can really align with and think through, oh, okay, that makes sense. You pay at the median. Most of your employees may not even know what that means. They didn't go through comp. They aren't necessarily benchmarking jobs or in HR. So really think about, in a lot of cases, this gap might just be a transfer of knowledge that hasn't really been managed and is cascading down through the employee population. The other part is a lot of companies do have a pay philosophy. They might even put it out there in the employee handbook or on the wall, but if it's not actually happening in the day-to-day practice and how you hire and how you communicate merit increases and how you answer questions when you have to bring someone new in, maybe over what current employees make, employees aren't going to trust that that pay philosophy actually exists. And they're going to start thinking it's just words on the wall. And employees can certainly kind of sniff out a fraud a mile away. And I'm not saying anyone here is ill intent. I actually think anyone in HR and compensation has the best intentions to pay people fairly. But employees talk about pay and they ask questions about pay more than ever than we've seen in decades. And when they might not be hearing from the organization consistently what that pay philosophy means, how that impacts them as the individual in that role, they're going to create a narrative all of their own. And in many cases, that's what we're seeing create this 43 or sometimes wider gap between, yes, we say we have a pay philosophy, but are we doing and taking action to make sure our employees actually understand that pay philosophy as well? So let's move on to the next slide too. So the say-do gap, what we say and what we do. I talked about a few things, that might create that disconnect. See those big statistics that we just saw on the screen. But let's break this down a little bit further because then we're going to talk about some tips to maybe overcome some of these gaps as well. So there are three core failures that we've often seen or had clients talk about or come out in studies like from World at Work and SHRM and others that often create the disconnect between we created a pay philosophy or we're going down the road to create a pay philosophy. And then will we actually be implementing actions to do the things that help employees know that the pay philosophy actually exists and understands what that means in the form of why they are paid the way they are paid and helps them make the right decisions that if growing in your organization is the best fit for them. So the first and foremost of this is the stated versus actual gap. Sounds like, well, we pay the market median. I said this on the last slide. First of all, do your employees even know what that means? Most people know what the word median is, but do they really know, like, well, in the market, what does that mean? Is that average? So does that mean I'm the only person paying average? Is that you're not willing to pay more, even if the market demands more? It spins up a lot of questions and it can feel like, well, the newest hires out earn people who've been there for years. It can actually feel like that. Well, if you pay the median and I think I'm under the median, are the new people making more than me? And let's be honest, that is going to happen. There are going to be times when you have to pay more for someone coming in the door over market to be able to acquire that talent or a new skill they may have that someone else doesn't, might put them in a position where that decision makes sense. Compression is real. Compression is a revolving door that you will continually have to try to manage within your company. But being able to go back to your pay philosophy and having data and having a way to talk to employees about why they make what they make, their potential to make more, and how that fits into your pay philosophy, your pay grade structure can help overcome not only some of this narrative that might be spinning up in their head, but also some of those decisions you will have to make as a company. But having a constant way to communicate and data to back that up often will put employees at ease because sometimes no communication is worse than communicating to keep that trust in place. So, this kind of stated versus actual is a real reason why we see that gap spin up, and there are ways to overcome it. But it's really sort of, I stated what we do, but my employees don't really understand that. So now they're thinking about all these other decisions that are happening, and they're not quite sure where they fall into the mix. Then there's the hidden logic. That sounds more like, well, we reward our top performers. Well, I don't know any employee who doesn't think that in some cases they are a top performer. So all of your employees are probably going, well, that means I'm going to be rewarded all the time. I'm going to get a higher merit increase, or I'm going to get that bonus this year. And I truly believe companies don't look to hire stupid people, so they're hiring people that they believe are going to be smart and be performing within an organization. So although that sounds really great and that looks really nice on your philosophy page, that we reward top performers, what does that really mean? That leaves a lot of room for inference and for error. It could feel like the star gets the same raise as everyone else with no explanation, or I'm the star. Why didn't I get that raise? And then combine that with maybe lack of communication around what performance means, how performance is tied to pay, how you also align that to where people fall within a pay grade or have the ability to then make merit or bonus and what that budget looks like. If they're already a high performer, if they're at the top of their range, are you going to still continually increase, or are we having a different conversation? There's a lot of ways that hidden logic can break down. So it's really important is to think about, well, if we're saying we reward top performers, what are all the pieces that go into what that means? What is your performance? What is a top performer? What does that mean you pay? Is that when they first come in? Is that top performers at the lower end of a pay range are going to get a bigger increase than top performers at a higher end of a pay range because they're already sort of at the max? You have to be able to ask those questions to make sure the narrative lines up for the employee. And then the last one that we really highlighted here was the translation gap. Again, this kind of is the breakdown of nomenclature. Sounds like we pay competitively and we're open about it. Okay, well, that feels like, well, people compare posted ranges and spot gaps, but no one can actually explain that to me. A lot of words that sound nice, but again, not necessarily something the employees understand. And now with pay transparency legislation and more companies posting ranges to be able to attract people, data's out there. And now with AI and other sorts of data, employees have more data at their fingertips than ever. So if you're talking about paying competitively, one of the things you need to think about is, what is the data we're using to help determine what competitive is? How are we incorporating that into how we communicate our pay philosophy and how we have created these pay rates and pay ranges? And are we prepared to sit down and break that down in an easy to understand way for our managers to discuss with their direct reports, or for comp and HR to talk to employees so they understand the bigger picture? Because again, they might start to feel like, well, I don't think I'm paid competitively. If you pay competitively, is that just for new hires? You posted a range that's higher than mine. Does that mean you're going to automatically increase my salary as well? And we know that that's not what this means, but those are going to be the questions that get spun up. So what's the cost of misalignment? So we're talking a lot about what the misalignment is, and I'm going to hurry up because I only have 30 minutes today. A lot. It's credibility loss. It's manager trust and erosion. Employees, they're going to blame their managers, who are going to blame HR first. So when they aren't getting the answers that they want, managers might just punt it back to you in HR and compensation because they're just saying, this is what they told me to say. Employees are going to create a narrative that isn't necessarily true. Your hard work is going to go unseen because we aren't putting the steps in place to make sure it's communicated appropriately. And then, of course, you're probably going to see some attrition within your organization. You might not be hiring the people coming in the door because they're going to get a perception that you can't answer those questions as well. There's real dollars and cents tied to this. It's not just, again, we don't have something that employees can align with. It's also, there's a really big bottom line that can impact the organization as well. So how do we think about helping overcome some of this? Hopefully I've been providing some tips and tricks as we talked about some of the gaps and some of the ways that we kind of see the difference between stating a pay philosophy and employees understanding what that means. But there are things that you can start to implement as far as like auditing how you go about this within your organization. So when we think about what you're saying you do and how you do it, do a quick audit. What like things to ask, does what we say about pay match what we actually do in offers and raises and promotions? Where do we find that contradictions? Are those contradictions valid? Again, you might have to hire someone over market to get them in the door, but is that valid? And do I have the data to back it up? Where you can look to this is philosophy documents on first creating a pay philosophy. Looking at what our pay practice reports. There's many free ones out there to help think about what our organization's doing when it comes to increases, merit. Are we on trend with what market's doing? Do we even have market data to help validate this within our company as well? Also, interact with your managers. Have you thought about training the managers on what your comp philosophy actually means? Have you trained them on how you price a job? Have you trained them on what your pay ranges actually mean? So when they're getting asked questions around pay from their employees, are they equipped to be able to answer those questions accurately? Or are they going to just go and punt that back to you? After a merit review, if your managers are communicating pay during merit, are you going back and doing a review of how it went? What went well? What went wrong? How can we help fix this the next time? And remember, talking about pay is hard. It's personal. And in a lot of cases, managers, they don't do this often. Sometimes it might be the first time they ever have. So putting some time and investment in that can also help bridge that gap. And then the employee perception audit. Like, it's okay to also go and audit, what do your employees really believe? What do employees believe you as an organization stand for on pay? Where are the gaps in that perception versus your intent? And how can you then think about putting pieces in place to close that gap as well? You can do pulse and engagement surveys. You can do exit interviews. You can do comp related like HR inquiries as well. Again, even the manager audit feeds this. What went well during that performance or merit review with your employee? And that can help you start to gather data on where you are at as an organization, what gaps you actually have, and then get the right data, get the right training in place to then start moving the needle on those conversations as well. And practical pay fixes, I basically just went through this. Gather the right information. Data is king here. Make sure you're gathering the audits, gathering your pay philosophy, creating one if you don't have one, and marrying up the audits against it. Make sure you're analyzing the gaps. What are they costing you? What's the credibility of who you're getting the data from? Are you putting a plan of attack in place to correct? Again, data's king here. How do you price? Do you have data to back it up? What are your pay ranges? How are you going into those decisions moving forward? Where are you completely off base? Helping to have some form of reporting to guide managers in what that means. Not too little and definitely not too much. Not a massive Excel spreadsheet of every data point that you've ever collected. So they really understand what's going on. And thinking about what is your roadmap to communicating as well, and not communicating just once. I can't emphasize that enough. Communication around pay usually happens at hire and during the merit increase. Employees think about it and talk about it way more than that throughout the year. So make sure you're equipped to have conversations more regularly, or be able to equip people they're asking questions to be able to answer back in a way that ties to your pay philosophy as well. And lastly, how can we help before we go to some quick questions? I mean, you can read this for yourself. We have a number of ways to help at Salary.com. A big one for those of you that said you don't have a pay philosophy, whether it's here or someone else, there's a lot of great consulting out there that can help you determine what the right philosophy is for your organization. Pulling in an expert to help you take that first step. They can even help you think about some of the pieces of data that help you go through an audit to make sure you're aligning the philosophy with reality within your company is a great place. And there's a ton of free resources out there as well. You could even honestly feed it into a Claude and see what it comes back with a great pay philosophy as a starting point and what steps you might need to take. And then again, reference that with a consultant or other experts in your field, maybe colleagues that you share information with through SHRM or World at Work, and get you on the right path to success. So that leaves us with about 5 minutes for questions. I popped them up over here. So if you see me looking this way, I'm going to pop them up over so I can read them. We do have a couple questions that came through. Is there still access to free salary data on Salary.com? Absolutely. Yes, that will never go away. You can always go to our website if you're looking for some market data to be able to use as a starting point for benchmarking jobs, getting a great sense of pay rates. The other free source that we offer is pay practice surveys that I like to point out. So, pay practice surveys mean you have the ability to get an output of companies that participate for free and say, here's what we have been doing for merit increases. We break it down by industry, by geography. It gives you another data point to leverage, and that's no cost to organizations that want to be a part of that. The other question we have is, how do we overcome the issue of new hires making more than existing employees? Good question. You probably are not ever going to overcome that issue. There will always be cases, depending on your industry, your geography, the need for that particular individual to fill that role, where you will make a pay decision that is, we are going to offer this employee more than the current employee in that role. Having a gap is not illegal. Having a gap does create some tension, especially if you're posting your pay ranges, and pay transparency can feel troublesome, but it's actually a great opportunity to build trust. Because what you should do is, if you are making that decision, is think about, well, then who are the talented people in that job already? And now how do we sit down to talk about a path for them to continually make more in our company? That could be career progression opportunities, upskilling. That could be the fact that as they gain new skills, or with time going into merit, they might see that increase within your organization. That's not going to be all, though. So please don't take that as every new hire can make more than current employees. You have an internal range, and you're going to have recruiters who say, nope, I always need to make more. Being able to compare those two together and come to a place that says, but we have to offer this because this is our philosophy around pay. We have different benefits. We're offering different, a sign-on bonus or other aspects. Make sure that that is part of the pay decision and communicated to that new hire. So when they're deciding if joining your organization is the right fit, they have the big picture too, and not just looking at salary. Employees tend to only look at salary, and they're not calculating in all the other benefits and dollars and cents that go into a total package. So that's another great way to start to bridge that gap within your organization as well. Awesome. I think that brings us to the hour. And I think those were all the questions I saw.
Yeah. I will also say that we do offer exactly what you said, Katie, an opportunity for free consulting. So I will put a link in the chat that is a free 30-minute session. You can also scan the QR code if you are interested. And your professional development credits are right on the screen for SHRM, HRCI, and World at Work. You don't need a code. But I think those are all the questions that popped up. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Aaliyah. Always love to be on a webinar with you. And thank you, everyone in the audience. We absolutely appreciate your time today.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.